I joke around that I'm a big fan of ossuaries. You know, I want to start a chain one day called Ossuaries Are Us, because ossuaries are great. For anybody interested in history, they're great. Why? They're self-dating. You don't have to do carbon-14 or anything like that, because they were only used, these in ancient Judea, Israel, from about 30 BCE to about 70 CE or AD, like for 100 years. 30 before the Common Era till about 70 after. That's 100 years. So you know anything, any ossuary you found, it's got a date to that period. Now, coincidentally, that's the same period that, more or less, that coincides with Jesus of Nazareth and his movement. Because Jesus, let's say he was born in year 0 or 1 or 2, and he dies around 30. So he's right in the middle of this strange habit of burying people twice, once before they decompose and once after. Well, you know, if you go into the Israel Museum, they'll tell you this is typical Jewish burial. But then you say, well, who did it? Well, it was typical Jewish burial 2,000 years ago, but only people in Jerusalem did it. Well, that means it's not typical, is it? It's typical Jewish burial, but most people in Jerusalem didn't do it. They didn't have the money. Tombs are expensive. They didn't have the wherewithal. And not everybody did. People got buried in the ground. Now, there's nothing typical about it. It means that certain people did it who maybe were believed that resurrection is around the corner. The end of days is around the corner. They wanted to keep their bones like ancient cryogenics. Keep your bones in a box because tomorrow the end is near. Now, out of all the stories from ancient Israel, there's only one story associated with that kind of burial. Jesus of Nazareth. Right? So what do we know from that? We know that they used ossuaries, the people who followed Jesus. Because otherwise, if they didn't use ossuaries, he was crucified, they would have buried him in the ground. 3 days he was dead. Well, why put him in a cave? Why not bury him in the ground? Well, clearly, that's how they buried. They were part of the small group of people who used secondary burial. Now, if you're a Christian believer, you say, well, 3 days later, he surprised them and he rose again. But when they buried him, obviously what they thought, they'd bury him in a shroud. You know, that's where you get shrouded. And what they would have done is come back a year later, take the bones and put them in a box. So what do we know? We know that ossuaries were used by a small group of people in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. And we know that Jesus and his followers were part of this small group of people. Wow. That means if you find an ossuary with a name related to the Gospels, odds are that maybe it's the same people, right? Because not everybody was doing it. If millions of people are burying this way, what are the odds? But if only like a small group. So these ossuaries are terrific for historians because they're self-dating and they are like they're a focus group. They only relate to people, you know, if you want to know about Jesus, you want to know about ossuaries. And if you want to know about the early Jesus movement, you want to know about ossuaries. But it gets better.